Hello, welcome. And as a continuation of the CHANUKAH lecture we gave about the idea of the battle between the Jews and the Greeks, the spiritual battle there, we thought we'd give a follow-up where we bring a couple of stories about Alexander the Great, which is the father of the Greek Empire. He's the one who basically did all the conquering of the world, as we said last time. And we see some interesting stories where the the Talmud actually speaks many stories about Alexander. Now we have to have a caveat here. A lot of these stories may not be meant to be taken on the literal level. The way that what's called Agaddah, which means stories, works in the Talmud. Some stories can be taken literally, and maybe they actually did happen. Some of them are meant to be metaphorical. However, all the stories, whether they happen to have happened literally, historically or not, they're always meant to be understood on a deeper level. Right? Sometimes the secrets, the very, very deep secrets of the Torah are actually contained in these stories. And usually the more crazy the story sounds, that's usually an indicator that the secret hidden within the story is much deeper, much more fundamental. Okay, so let's get into it. So the first story we're going to speak about, I think, is a story in the Gemara, the Talmud, in Maseches Talmud. It's quite an obscure Gemara. I think both of the stories might be there. Anyway, so the story goes like this. Alexander was on a journey once, and he was conquering the world, as he did, and he found, he sat down to have his lunch. And he had some salty fish, right? And to get rid of the saltiness of the fish, I think he dipped it in the water, or maybe he drank some water afterwards to get rid of the saltiness of the fish. And when he tasted it, they said, "Hey, this is no ordinary water. This water is none other than the water from the river which comes out from the Garden of Eden." So he said, "I've got." Obviously, he's a conqueror, so what's he immediately think? Oh, Garden of Eden, got to conquer that as well. So he goes and he traces the river up to the source, and he finds, the gates to the Garden of Eden. And he said, "Let me in." And they said, "No, there's a shar Hashem tzadikim avoy. This is a gate for dedicated to God. Only the righteous may enter it." And obviously, he wasn't righteous. Okay. And he said, "Well, I'm a king. At least give me something. Yeah, at least give me some respect. I am a king." So he said. So they threw out over the wall. Came flying out a very, very mysterious object. So this object was. He picked it up and he saw it was actually a human skull, but it had the flesh eyes. The eyeballs were still inside the skull. Very, very puzzling. So what do the Greeks do? Greek science, they investigate it. So they want to make measurements on it to find out the properties of the skull. So what the sages of, was it of Athens? I can't remember. One of the Greek sages, they started doing the experiments and they tried to weigh it. So what they did is they had a balance, a scale, where you put one thing on one side and you put different weights on the other side to see and how much they, when they equal each other, then you know that this is the same weight as that. So they put the skull on one side, so obviously it tipped down, and then they put gold and silver on the other side, right? And instead of like going down until being even, it didn't budge. It seemed this skull was very heavy, which is very strange. He was able to carry it. They put more gold and silver on the other side, and it didn't weigh down. It just wouldn't budge. And I think it even says they put all the gold and silver in the whole world on it. If I remember, it's a long time since I've seen this story inside, just doing it from memory here. And nothing would happen. No change at all. So he said, "Well, this mystery is just too puzzling for me. We can't work it out. So who should we ask? Well, where did the skull come from? The Garden of Eden, right? Okay, so the Jews must know about it then." So he went to the Jewish sages. They asked, and he asked them, what's going on with this skull? He said, well, it's got human eyes in it, they told him. And the human eyes never get satisfied. Whenever you see something, you want it, but you're never satisfied with what you see. It's the idea of greed, okay? Right? So the more gold and silver you actually put on the other side, the heavier, conceptually, the heavier the skull got, because it outweighed it. That gold and silver was not enough to bring balance to the skull. The skull always wanted more. The eye wanted more. So how do I know this is the case? So it's simple. Take some dust, sprinkle it on the eyes. The eyes won't be able to see anymore, and then the gold shouldn't outweigh the gold anymore. And sure enough, they took the dust, sprinkled it on the eyes, and then like that, and who knows, like a catapult or something, like with 100 tons of gold, like just shooting off suddenly the skull. Who knows? Anyway, that's the story. So what's the meaning behind this story? If you remember, we spoke about the battle between the Jews and the Greeks. So the light of the first and the fourth day, that was a battle between them. The Greeks they both got a correct way of perceiving the world, but the Greeks' way of perceiving the world is superficial. That means they understand the superficial structure and harmony to the world, the laws of nature and things like that, science. The Jews understand the spiritual laws of the world, that what lies behind the physical, that which is hidden, that's in the mind's eye, so to speak. So you've got the two ways of looking at the world. The Greeks look with the physical eyes, the Jews look with the mind's eye, let's say, and using the light of the first and the fourth day. The fourth day was the light of the sun, moon, and stars, which is a superficial light which shines on the surface of something, superficiality, in order that you can see what's on the surface in the world. Whereas the light of the first day, we explained, is not a physical light, it's a light of intelligence, of wisdom, the light of knowledge of God. That's the light of the world to come. As we explained many times, the whole idea of the world to come is our experience of God, our awareness of God. That's the light of the first day. So, when a person gets something from the Garden of Eden, what does that mean? The Garden of Eden is that's the world of reward. So it's basically the place where you see who you are. Yeah, because as we explained, the reward people get in the world to come is only in accordance with what they did in this world and what they became in this world. As we explained, the more light of God a person brings into himself, that will actually be his reward, the light which he brought in this world, which he didn't experience yet because of the mechanics of the killing of the Leviathan, as we explained, in order that people don't experience the product of the action straight away. Otherwise, that'll take away free will. So, when something is thrown out to Alexander, the king of the Greeks, it's got to be something which talks to the essence of what the Greeks are. And that is the idea of superficial sight. And then that's why he got a skull, right, with eyes in it, with human eyes, right? It's the idea of looking with the external vision. And we see this idea that the idea of greed comes from that. When a person, there's a concept in Judaism called ayin hara, that you can curse a person. Cursing means you're limiting a person. You're saying they should only be this. That a person curses someone to die, that means that their life should be cut short. The idea of a curse is you're putting boundaries on something, you're limiting something. Whereas blessing means it should have abundance. Like interesting, the word brocha, blessing in Hebrew, is the same word as the word berecha. It's the same letters, just different vowels. Brocha and brecha. Brocha means blessing, and brecha is a spring. Spring is the idea of the water which constantly renews itself, right? It's not like a pool of water which just stays stagnant. it constantly is drawing from the waters in the earth, subterranean waters, and then it comes out in spring, and then you get water coming out like that. That's the idea of you have something, but it increases, gets bigger. That's the idea of brocha. Right? A curse is something which limits. Right? There's one of the laws of making blessings. I'm not sure we actually do this blessing nowadays. A person's measuring how much produce he's got, right? Before he's done the measurement, he can make a blessing and a prayer saying, God, may you put a blessing into this pile of grain. Once he's finished measuring it, he can't do it anymore. Why? Because once he's given a limit to it, he said, right, this is how much it is, it's not able to expand anymore. Whereas before he's actually counted it, there's this concept that the grain can actually keep producing as long as you can't see it. The idea is, Eina brocha metsuya ela b'dova hasomu min ha'ohen. Blessing, remember what we explained blessing was, that increasing, is not found only in something which is somu, which is blinded literally, or hidden, min ha'ohen, from the eyes. So as long as the eye is not shoyl, it doesn't have any dominion or doesn't have any influence on the thing, then blessing can happen, which is very interesting. It just occurred to me that's kind of like what quantum science says happens now, that when you're not looking at something, it's it depends whether you talk about subatomic level or even on the macro level. There's a discussion about how far it goes. But the idea is, when you're not looking at something, it goes into something called superposition. That means it's not limited to the number of states it's in. It can have top spin, it can bottom spin. It can go through one slit, another slit. It can go both and through neither, all at the same time. All the options are all true, as long as you haven't looked at the experiment and seen exactly where the photon or the electron is going through. Is it going through this slit or that slit? Oh, it went through that one. So then it becomes limited. And actually, you can show this experimentally, that whether you look at the experiment as it's happening or not, you get a different result on the screen, which is mind-boggling. Yeah, if you don't look at it, then it has a wave pattern on the screen, as if it's taking all the options at once. As soon as you look at the experiment, then the light, if you put one photon at a time and you're actually looking at each one, then it has just one line here and one line there where the two slits are. Okay, anyway, that's besides the point. So this idea of the power of the eye to limit, that's the idea of the light of the fourth day, right? That's the idea of cursing. Yeah, the idea of you're limiting something by looking at it. Whereas blessing is something where you're not looking at it. You don't have this power of looking. Yeah, so we said that's the idea of cursing. Cursing means verbally putting limits on something, but even looking at something can have an influence. It's called the ayin hara, because the evil eye, we call it. So it's a concept in Judaism. Whatever it means, how it works, it's another discussion. But let's stick to to its relevance to our topic here. So the way the Greeks look at the world is they look at it superficially. So they limit the world to their vision. That's why the world is limited. That's why miracles can't happen, because miracles is the idea of something which goes beyond the idea of blessing. When a person's measuring his pile of grain, blessing can still happen as long as he hasn't looked at it yet, so to speak. It can still increase. The eye's limit. So when Alexander the Great gets this skull, it's telling him that's what the Greeks are. The Greeks, basically, because you only look at things on the surface, you're limiting, you're causing lack of blessing in the world. Which is very interesting that before the Greeks, there was a concept of prophecy. right? And you also had the idea of real idolatry, where people could tap into the supernatural. When the Greeks came along, that's tap was switched off, and you have a different problem in the world now. Instead of idolatry, you have the idea of apikoursis, or heresy, or atheism. It's the idea of ego. It's like, instead of looking outside of you to connect to something higher, right? In the good side of that was prophecy, people communicating directly with God. The evil side of that was idolatry, people connecting with physical forces, with the sun, moon, and stars. Now, but that means people still had that ability to penetrate beyond the superficial. Once the Greeks came along, they brought this concept into the world, which was already there, but they solidified it in the world, the idea of superficiality, and that's our definition of reality, is only what we see, what we can empirically measure. Right? That's the idea of the measuring, how much does the skull weigh? Right? So the Greeks bring into the world the idea of not being able to penetrate the mask, or the barrier between the visible and the non-visible, or the natural and the supernatural. And that's the whole idea of Greek science, philosophy. That's how we function now. The Greeks were very, very good at that. And they were very good at looking and examining things on the surface. And they were very precise with that for their time. Obviously now science has advanced so much now, right? But for their time, it was revolutionary. But it's because they've dropped down from the level of supernatural to the world of natural now. That's what the Greeks did. That's the idea of superficial sight. The idea of limits. Yeah, not having infinity. The idea of God himself. God's limited according to them. It's a big man in the sky. A man is someone who's a being which is defined. He has a head, he has a size. He can be very, very big, he can be massive, but he still has a size. He's measurable. Right? This idea of the Greek gods. The whole conception of the universe is based on limits, things which are visible, which are tangible. And that's a curse, because you limit the world to only physical, measurable things. There isn't that breaker, that wellspring of spirituality which underlies the physical reality, which allows the idea of miracles, idea of communication with God directly. They took that away from the world, whether they did or it was to do with the Jewish people, to do with the third soul of the Jewish people, as we explained in the lecture about the different souls of the Jewish people, the four souls. So now we understand what's going on with the skull. So from the Garden of Eden, they throw out something which the king of the Greeks is. So it's meant to represent what Greek ideology is, the idea of an eye, of the human eye. I'm not quite sure what the significance of it being in a skull. Okay, that might be another very amazing idea, which I'm not aware of, unfortunately. And the idea that the rabbis say, put the dust on the skull, is the rabbis, the Jewish rabbis, who use the light of the first day to explain to Alexander what the problem is, because they understand the idea of the limits of the physical eye. Then, once, so it's not enough. It's limited. The gold and silver that the eye sees, it's not enough. It's putting limits on the gold and silver. It's not enough, right? Right? Whereas when the dust was put on the eyes, then the gold and silver was enough, right? Then it regained its power, so to speak. You could look at it like that. Very nice. Okay, so that's you see this idea of the battle between the light of the first day and the light of the fourth day in this story. Right? But we also see something else in this story, is the idea of greed. The idea of when you look at something superficially and you don't look deep into what something is, then you end up having greed and you end up having jealousy. So that takes us on to the next story, which is it's a really nice story. I love it. But you're going to see it. Hopefully this will lead on to our next lecture, which hopefully is going to be about giving. I'm not sure yet. We'll see how it goes. So the story goes like this. So Alexander wanted to know how the Jewish court systems worked. Yeah, he says, we've got our court system, and the Jewish people, famous for their court systems and their laws. Yeah, not just the ritual laws, but also the monetary, I'm not sure, the financial courts. Is that what you call it? And he sat down on listening to some of these cases, which the based in which the Jewish courts had in front of them. And two people came in, and they were arguing about a sale of a piece of land. So let's call them Reuben and Shimon. Reuben and Simeon. This is how we usually assign names to get cases in monetary cases clearer. Yeah, call them names just for simplicity. So Reuben and Shimon. So Reuben sold his piece of land to Shimon, and they had an argument. Shimon said, I bought this piece of land off Reuven. Okay, what's the problem? So Shimon said, but I found when I was digging in my land, I was ploughing the field with the plough, and the plough hit something, and I dug it up, found it was a whole massive chest of gold, of treasure, whatever it was. So what's the problem? He said, well, when I paid for the land, I only paid for the land. I didn't pay for a whole chest of gold as well. So this doesn't belong to me. This belongs to Reuven, the seller. And Reuven says, sorry, when I sold the land, I sold everything in it, including something which was hidden. So you have it. And they kept arguing, saying, no, you should have it, you should have it. Very strange court cases, right? You can see that's the whole point. And in the end, the rabbi said, okay, Reuven, do you have a son? So, yeah, I've got a son. Okay, unmarried son. Shimon, do you have a daughter? Yeah, I've got a married daughter. Well, how about you arrange a marriage between them? So let them meet each other, and if they like each other, they can get married. And then you can give the chest of gold to them as a dowry to help them set up their new home. And the Reuven and Shimon said, yeah, fantastic, great, we'll do that. And they lived happily ever after. A genius, beautiful way of resolving the situation there. Okay, very original way of thinking there. This isn't a typical, for those who are wondering, this is not a typical case which you get in Jewish law, by the way. Usually people are arguing, but you're going to see the point of this story now. So the rabbi turned to Alexander and said, so how do we do? What do you think about this? Yes. So what do you think about this case, about the people, and the ruling? So, well, if they were in Greece, this is how we would have ruled the case. We would have killed both of them, and we would have taken the money for the state. Okay. Fine. A drastically different way of looking at the case, and arbitrating. My English is so bad. Judging the case. So, what on earth is going on here? What a strange thing. The case is strange. Then the way the Jewish judge did it was quite a novel, quite an innovative way of judging the case. And then Alexander goes and says he would have killed both of them and taken the money for the state. So we see something else now. We spoke about the idea of looking at things superficially, that you have the idea of greed. This ties into the idea of giving and taking. Someone who sees only things on the surface and he doesn't look at the reason why a person has something, what happens? He gets jealous. He wants to take it. He's thinking about himself. Someone who understands that everything he has in this world is there for a purpose, he understands, he goes beyond the superficial. He doesn't just look at the money, oh, I want that money, the greed. Like in the case of the skull. Yeah, we just wanted all the gold and silver on the other side of the scale. When a person looks at something with the light of the first day, with his inner eye, he looks, 1 minute, what's this property of this other person's got for? God gave it to him for a reason. It must be something to do with his personal job, his personal task, which he has to achieve in this life. God gives everyone what they need to achieve their job in this life. Everyone's got their own unique job. Generally, it's to get connection with God, but everyone's got their own unique way of doing that. Like someone might have a massive wealth because his job is to be a kind person and to give charity. Some people might have, I don't know, have not so much money. You have to know what their job is. Maybe the idea is the idea of to living a meager life in order they can focus their life on. Maybe the idea is to be honest in business and not to steal, right? To be an honest businessman, yeah. Which is so that he has to have the temptation to be dishonest because he's desperate for money, right? Everyone's got their own reasons, yeah. Like it's like someone being jealous of someone else's glasses. Oh, he's so lucky he's got glasses. Oh, I don't have glasses. But that's a crazy thing to say. The reason he's got glasses is because he needs them. God gives him the glasses because that's something necessary for him. Right. So when you look at things on the deeper level, jealousy just disappears. It's meaningless. You don't get jealous anymore. So, for those who are well versed in the Torah, this is the idea of Joseph, Joseph, not looking at things on the surface, always looking deeper. You find he cries a lot, crying blurs the vision. He didn't go with his master's wife, adultery with her, right? He said to her, when she tried to seduce him, he ran away and he left his clothes with her, right? And that's how she said, look, she said to the husband, look, he when I cried out, when he tried to force himself onto me, I screamed and he ran away and he left his coat, right? But the truth is that she ripped the coat off him when he was trying to escape from her, trying to force herself to be with him. What's the idea of the clothes? The clothes are the superficial. So Joseph was saying to her, you want me because I'm beautiful? You don't want me because who I am. You just want me for my body because I look very nice. So if you just want the superficial, here, take my clothes. Take my covering, so to speak. Yeah, the whole idea of the blessing of Joseph is the blessing Ale Oyin, he goes above the eye. That's a blessing that Jacob gave to him. The idea he transcends the eye. It's always going to the internal. Yeah, it's another discussion for another day. I was thinking of doing it in the CHANUKAH one, but besides it would be too long otherwise if I included that in it. It's a shame. It's a beautiful set of ideas as well. So the idea of looking at things on a superficial level means that you're going to naturally want to take. So Greek society was built on the concept of taking. And you're going to hear, if you've got a sensitive ear, you already hear that that's how societies are run nowadays. They're based on taking. They're based on my rights. I have the right to this, right? Right? You've got your rights. So it's all focused on taking, right? I've got rights to this. This belongs to me. This right. You cannot infringe on my rights. The Jewish way of looking at things is obligations. It's the other direction. Yeah, I've got the obligation to not steal from you, right? Whereas the Greeks look at it, no, I've got the rights to my property. I hope you understand the subtlety in this. It ends up seeming on the surface the same thing. I'm not allowed to steal. But the question is, why can't I steal? Is it because I've got obligation to respect someone else's property, right? Or is it that I've got the rights to my property and someone who steals from me is breaking my rights? So you're focused on, sort of philosophically, you're focusing on taking rights. Whereas obligations means, what is my obligations to do to other people? What do I have to give to other people? I have to give them, I have to respect their property. So this is what's going on in the story with the two men. Each one, and you see this in Jews in real life, you really see this attitude come out. It's not unheard of. This, maybe not this level of the story, but the idea of consideration for others and making sure that I don't want to do something which might affect someone. I don't want to start up a business in such a way. Am I going to take away from their customers? Is it the right thing to do? Be very careful about trampling on other people's toes, because we've got obligations not to hurt people, not to upset people, not to cause financial or physical damage to anyone. It's obligations. We're looking at giving. So these two people came with this mindset. That I sold something, right? But sorry, we'll start off with Shimon. I bought something, but I don't have the rights to this, right? Yeah, I've got the obligation to make sure that he is not out of pocket. And he sold me the land, but if it means that this chest of gold actually doesn't belong to me, I've got the obligation to make sure he gets it back. So that they had a court case arguing, a heated argument. I have to give it back to you because I've got obligation not to take this if it's yours. And the other one was saying the same thing. No, I sold it to you. So therefore, I think that from my point of view, I've got the obligation to make sure that you get it. So that they're trying to give to each other in this court case. It's really strange. It's not come from selfishness. It's come from the opposite of selflessness, of the idea of responsibility and obligation. So what does the rabbi do? He said, look, so you're so focused on giving. All right, so give your children a spouse and give them the money. So more giving. Right? So Alexander looked at this. He said, 1 minute, if we would have done that, that would destroy our whole society. Our society is based on rights. And if we have people giving to everyone else, then the whole structure of the capitalist society doesn't work unless there's greed. Yeah? Capitalist society is generally a good thing, because the idea of fairness, equality. I'm not talking about the capitalism we have nowadays. That's a corruption of the idea of capitalism. So you've got the government that interferes unfairly it gives favors to big companies, corporations. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a complete free market. Yeah, that's just fair. Yeah, everyone agrees. What's the value of this? I'll pay this. Yeah, but people are basing their whole society on rights. The idea of capitalism is that greed is good, right? If you don't have that, then the driving force for buying and selling goes away now, right? So if people are just focused on giving to everyone, so how do we generate wealth? Yeah, people won't put up the prices. We won't get a growing economy, right? However, so basically, Alexander says these will be called enemies of the state. So we'll kill them. And what do? What Greeks do, they take to correct the balance. We'll take it for ourselves. Whereas the sages said, what do we do with the thing? Give it to someone else. Alexander says, we'll take it for ourselves. We see this balance. It's very interesting. The different ways of looking at the world, superficially or looking beyond at the purpose of things, right, as the Jews are meant to, comes out in the form of the societies based on obligations from the Jewish point of view or rights from the other one. And the idea of greed coming into the Greek society as well. So there's two beautiful stories with amazing ideas connected with them. And we see that's how modern society works, essentially. It's the idea of rights, human rights, property rights. Yeah. It all comes from the mentality of taking. And as we mentioned, throughout the series of lectures, and I think at the end of the one, I can't remember which one it was now, at the end of one of the lectures, we spoke about what the world to come is like, the metaphor of the people sitting at the table, and each one's you got a nice banquet with lots of food on the table, and everyone's ready to eat, and this is the same for good people and bad people, for the righteous and the wicked. They're both sitting at this table. However, the catch is that no one has elbows. So as we explained, that when you don't have elbows, you try picking up the food, you try putting it in your mouth, you can't do it. So the evil people, their whole life, they've been takers. So they're looking at the food, how am I going to get it? I want it. They're only thinking about how they're going to take from the table. Like in their life, they try to take, and it won't work. They'll be stuck, they'll starve, they'll suffer, seeing all the beautiful, amazing food in the metaphor. Whereas the righteous, what were they doing in their life? They were givers. So they say, okay, oh, there's some lovely food. Who can I give this to? Oh, I got someone opposite me. Hey, would you like some food? Let me give you. All right, so, and the person accepts. So let me give you. So, oh, okay, fine. And then the person gives them back, and then it's constant giving. Right? When people are taking, eventually there's going to be friction. There's going to be arguments, and that leads to worse things. It leads to stealing. It leads to killing. That's a problem in a society which takes. Those are the dangers which you have. Whereas a society which focuses on responsibilities, you end up having one which everyone's giving to each other, and you have, well, thank God we know that in Orthodox Jewish communities the crime rate is very low. So we see this idea being borne out, the idea of thinking about others and not thinking about yourself primarily, thinking about what you can do to help someone else. Yeah. Anyway, okay, there's some nice ideas there. I hope you enjoyed them, and we'll see you in the next video, hopefully. Thank you very much. All the best.